This is a story about how a woman who was about to give birth was trapped in the snow on the road. She began to give birth, and the wolves nearby felt it. Wolves make great villains. They've threatened many fictional characters, from Little Red Riding Hood to the Three Little Pigs. In actuality, since humans have persecuted wolves for centuries, most wolves fear humans and avoid encounters. Wolves are undoubtedly capable of killing humans, but statistically speaking, the threat's negligible. It was not the only dramatic change from the apex predator returning to its old hood. Many of those changes are counterintuitive, with numbers of prey animals rising, even as the wolves feed off them. To the early settlers, the wolf was an enemy to be treated like the wilderness itself, something to be subdued and excluded. Even today, while some enlightened farmers learn to live beside the animals, others want to return to the old ways of driving them to destruction. Siberia is characterized by vast, dense forests that extend over hundreds of kilometers. And this vast province in southern Russia contains many rivers and animals that are characterized by their ability to cope with harsh weather conditions there, especially the snow that covers the mountains all year round. Wolves are among the most common types of animals that inhabit these forests, as they multiply abundantly there because nature helps them to do so. The events of this story took place with a young woman named Sophia, who lived with her family in a village in the city of Krasnodar in northern Siberia, Russia, about 18 years ago. The young woman met a young man named Vadim, who lived in the same village, and they fell in love with each other. Despite some obstacles they faced, they overcame all challenges and eventually managed to marry each other. The two young people were racing against time to get married before Vadim was sent into the army. Just a week after they held their wedding ceremony, Vadim had to leave the woman he loved so much for Moscow. The two were very happy, although their time together as a couple was short-lived. Vadim had dreamed of being a pilot in the Russian army since he was young. He finally fulfilled his dream after passing his test and started thinking about moving his girlfriend, now wife, Sophia, to the capital Moscow to settle there. Vadim was absent for more than 10 months. And during that time, Sophia discovered that she was pregnant. The father felt delighted when he learned about the news of his wife's pregnancy, and he would send letters to Sophia telling her that he would try to come home before she gave birth. But unfortunately, practical training was organized for pilots during that period, which prevented him from leaving the camp no matter what happened. Otherwise, he would lose his job. The husband was very worried about his wife, who stayed alone at home, especially since the weather was freezing and it was snowing heavily. He tried to contact his parents, who were living in a nearby village, and asked them to go to his wife to spend that difficult period with her until he returned. His parents caught a cold in those days, which made them unable to travel, so Sophia still found herself alone at home. One day, Sophia felt pregnancy contractions. She got into a car and drove to the maternity clinic in the city, which was about 30 kilometers from the village where she lives. The young woman went to her friend to go to the hospital with her, but she was not present at her home as she had left for the city to visit her sick brother. Sophia was not aware that the petrol in her car was not enough to get the car to the town. And while she was driving down a forested road covered with snow, the car stopped suddenly, which made the young woman very disappointed. The pain was increasing, and visibility outside was almost non-existent due to the intense snowstorm that was brewing. Even though Sophia got out of her car and tried to call for help from the few cars passing by that road, everyone refused to stop. She found herself in an awkward position, especially since she no longer had the strength to resist because she was giving birth. Sophia returned to the car and stayed there as she thought of a way to give birth. Then she got out of her car again and kept walking on the road. And there she saw a group of wolves coming from the other side towards her, which made her panic and hide behind trees. Meanwhile, Sophia took off her coat and put it on the ground. And then she lay on the ground, closed her eyes, and kept asking God to protect her and her little one because she was hopeless. A large wolf approached her, and the herd she was walking with followed her. Although some wolves tried to approach to prey on them, the powerful and predatory wolves screamed in their faces and forced them to turn back because they noticed that the woman was pregnant and was about to give birth. The wolf kept standing near Sophia as if she was defending her. And after a moment, the wolves approached and surrounded the young woman, continuing to protect her, and waited for her to give birth. Sophia did not believe what was happening with her as her panic turned into reassurance, and she calmed down and began to push her newborn to come out. The young woman was screaming hard because she had given birth for the first time. And moments later, she was completely silent. A tiny baby was lying on her coat, which he placed on the ground, and he began to cry. The snow was falling abundantly and covered the mother completely. The infant continued crying, and pieces of snow were falling on his body. The huge wolf noticed that the mother stopped moving completely because she froze, while the newborn remained moving. Then, she hugged the infant, covered him with her body, and protected him from the cold and snow, while the other wolves surrounded the mother and began to warm her. After a few moments, she woke up to find herself among wolves. The mother felt great anxiety and panic when she noticed that her little boy was not present, as she thought that the wolves had devoured him. But suddenly, she heard his voice crying, and when she got up, she found him sleeping with the wolf. Sophia rushed to hold her son in her hands for the first time, and she kept kissing him and crying while the wolves watched over her. The scene was unique, as the young woman was carrying her baby in her hands and protecting it from the cold and snow coming down. At the same time, the wolves ensured that they protected them from the cold after turning around, rubbing against them, and preventing the cold snow currents from reaching them. Sophia was looking at that wolf, shocked at her reaction, that instead of devouring her baby, she decided to defend and protect him. And she also protected her at the beginning, too, and prevented the other wolves from approaching her. The wolf seemed happy and proud of what she had done because she is also a mother and realizes well what it means for a mother to give birth and the difficult situation in which she's in after that. Sophia slept with these wolves because she felt exhausted. And when she woke up, she found that the snowstorm had wholly subsided and it had become clear. Taking her baby and going back to her car, she began to look for a solution to her car problem. And there, she saw the car of her husband's parents. She was parked next to the car where they came to look for her. And when they found her car was empty, they waited there until her return. Meanwhile, the wolves continued to watch Sophia from afar, and the huge wolf approached them. When they were sure she was in safe hands, they left, while the young woman watched them with tears in her eyes. The young woman continued on her way to the hospital with her husband's parents. There, she received the necessary health care to ensure that she and her baby were fine, and then returned home. Vadim could not believe what had happened to his wife and son when he came to visit them, and he learned about what had happened there. In the end, he took them to Moscow to live there.